Hey guys, welcome to my channel, Deadly Men, where we unravel the dark side of men who commit unspeakable crimes. Today, we're going to take a look at a horrible case. It is the case of Shele Covlin's tragic demise, which had caused a stir in Manhattan on the eve of New Year's 2010. As the sun dawned on December 31, 2009, signaling the culmination of the decade, the bustling New Year's Eve preparations in Times Square, a different form of turmoil unfolded that morning in an upscale Upper West Side apartment. The lifeless body of 47-year-old Shele Covlin, a mother of two, was discovered in the bathtub, ostensibly the result of a slip and fall. How did such a beautiful woman with such a bright future end up dead on the floor of her bathroom? Shele Danes grew up on the West Side, immersed in an Orthodox Jewish community. Her family's deep-seated roots in this tight-knit neighborhood shaped her upbringing. Her love marked Shele's journey from a blissful childhood to an accomplished adulthood for learning and academic excellence. This passion for knowledge eventually led her to a prestigious degree in asset management, opening doors to a thriving career in the Swiss banking sector. Her rapid ascent in the financial world saw her skillfully managing multi-million-dollar portfolios for her clients. In 1998, despite a successful career in one of the world's wealthiest cities, Shele felt a void in her life. She had financial security and a loving family, yet her dream of becoming a mother still needed to be fulfilled. In February 1998, determined to change her destiny, Shele attended a Jewish singles event aimed at helping those seeking their significant other. There, she met 26-year-old Rod Covlin, a fellow professional in the banking sector. The young couple shared many common interests, both driven by ambitions for success and stability in life. Their connection was instant and profound. The relationship blossomed rapidly as they complemented each other perfectly, disregarding the notable age difference. Shele and Rod were inseparable, spending every moment together. Their love was so intense that shortly after meeting, they decided to get married. Despite some acquaintances considering it a hasty decision, for Rod and Shele, everything felt just right. The happy couple soon welcomed two beautiful children, a boy and a girl, completing their family. On the exterior, Shele Covlin portrayed the epitome of success in Manhattan, an alluring, energetic woman with a young family and a thriving career in finance. However, beneath the surface, her relationship with her husband, Rod Covlin, 11 years her junior, had disintegrated by the end of 2009. She discovered that Rod was having an affair. It wasn't just one affair. It was several. Though Shele would later file for divorce, she had arranged for Rod to live across the hall for the ease of the couple's children. On New Year's Eve 2009, the idyllic life of the Covlin family was shattered by a tragic accident that led to Shele's death. Initially, the police deemed it an unfortunate accident. On the morning of December 31, 2009, Rod Covlin said he received a frantic call from the couple's 9-year-old daughter. Rushing to the apartment, he said he discovered a distressing sight: Shele submerged in a bathtub filled with bloody water. Rod promptly pulled her from the tub, called 911, and initiated CPR. Emergency services hoped Rod could provide the necessary assistance to save the victim. Following the operator's instructions over the phone, Rod pulled her out of the water and attempted resuscitation. But it soon became clear that saving her life was impossible. Shele's body was cold and motionless. A seemingly distraught Rod covered her with a blanket he found in the bedroom and waited for the police to arrive. Upon arrival, the police were greeted by a lavish residence steps away from the city park. The Upper West Side was known for its safety, and the officers initially surmised that Shele's death was another tragic case of self-harm. Entering the apartment, they found children's toys scattered around, not unusual given the upcoming holiday. They then proceeded to the bathroom where the woman's body, wrapped in a blanket by her husband, lay. The bloody water in the tub and the wet floor indicated that Rod had recently pulled the body from the water. Surveying the bathroom, the officers noted an open cabinet door with a torn hinge, suggesting the woman might have slipped and torn it off while trying to hold on to the door. Forensic experts who arrived shortly after conducted a thorough examination to rule out other possible causes of the tragic incident. After a careful inspection, They determined there was no break-in, and no signs of a struggle were found. Investigators increasingly leaned towards the belief that Shele's death was an accident. The detective handling the case decided to speak with family members. During their questioning, it was revealed that Shele and Rod's 9-year-old daughter was the first to discover her mother's body. Traumatized and shocked by what she had seen, the girl managed to tell the police officer how everything happened. It turned out that the previous night, she and her younger brother had been sleeping in their mother's bed, a fairly common occurrence. Waking up in the middle of the night and noticing her mother's absence, she went to look for her and stumbled upon the horrifying scene in the bathroom. The frightened child hurriedly contacted her father for help. Rod and Shele had just separated, and he had moved into a new apartment on the same floor in the same building. Crossing the corridor was all it took to reach his apartment. The girl called her father, who was nearby, and arrived immediately. Entering the bathroom, he pulled Shele's body from the water and called for emergency services. The girl's account matched exactly what Rod had described, confirming the theory of an accidental death. The police informed Shele's relatives about the tragedy, which deeply shocked everyone. The autopsy and forensic examination were scheduled for the day after the body was found. However, surprisingly, it never took place. When the medical examiner called the investigators to start the examination, he unexpectedly learned that, despite its necessity, the procedure would not be conducted. This baffled the examiner, wondering how this could happen. It turned out that a rabbi from the synagogue Shele frequented had intervened. He contacted an organization responsible for the burial of Orthodox Jews, which then requested the police for permission to access the tragedy site for religious rites required by the victims' families' faith. Permission was granted, and a team accompanied by the rabbi arrived at the scene. They cleaned the bathtub of blood traces and prepared Shele's body before the burial. All collected evidence and clues were destroyed before reaching the police's forensic department. The organization acted swiftly because autopsies are considered taboo in Orthodox Jewish tradition, seen as desecrating the deceased's body. In this case, the synagogue's rabbi pressured Shele's family. Grieving relatives and husband, appreciative of the rabbi's assistance and with no doubts about the accidental nature of the incident, didn't object to his help. The family also agreed to forego the autopsy, leaving the funeral arrangements to the burial preparation organization. Within 24 hours, Shele was buried. Hundreds of people attended to pay their last respects and offer condolences to the family. Later, upon learning from the police that potential clues were destroyed during the cleaning of the bathroom, doubts about the official version of Shele's death began to haunt her parents. A fall in the bathtub certainly posed a risk, but the likelihood of death from such an accident seemed increasingly improbable to them. Although nothing substantiated their doubts, the thought that the daughter's demise was not accidental troubled them deeply. Since the evidence was destroyed, the New York Police Department lost the opportunity for further investigation. This prompted the family to hire a private detective to clarify the circumstances and verify if Shele's death was indeed due to a tragic fall. The private investigator hired by the woman's relatives began unraveling this peculiar case. First, visiting the deceased's family home to speak with the relatives, he learned that Rod and Shele's relationship was far from perfect. Their marriage had been facing serious challenges. The couple had celebrated their 10th wedding anniversary in 2008, but soon after, their marital bliss began to crumble. Rod faced difficulties in his career, frequently changing jobs. It was revealed that he had developed a gambling addiction, investing huge sums in it. These behavioral changes worried Shele. She was dissatisfied with her husband, who neglected the family, spending extensive time on computer games. Rod was using their savings for backgammon tournaments, which Shele had complained about to her close ones. Frustrated by the amount of family money he spent on his numerous travels, Shele also discovered that he had been unfaithful during his many trips. It's important to note that Shele was neither passive nor naive regarding her husband's behavior. Upon discovering his infidelities through his emails, she decided to end their marital relationship and obtain permission for a religious divorce. Externally, the couple still appeared as spouses, but Rod had moved into another apartment in the same building. An official divorce required some time to process. Despite their separation and strained relations, Shele and Rod tried to maintain a friendly facade, especially for their children. However, conflicts and disagreements often arose due to Rod's behavior. Shele had recently expressed to her close ones her grievances about her husband, describing him as aggressive and hot-tempered. She felt he was monitoring her, entering her apartment when she wasn't home, and checking her emails. She also suspected that Rod had installed a camera in the building's corridor to see when she came home. These complexities in their marital life could have been grounds for further investigation into Shele's death. Gathering all these details, the private detective proposed the theory that Rod might have been involved in his wife's demise. He needed to conduct further investigations to uncover the whole truth. The detective's first goal was to determine if a crime had indeed taken place at the scene where the body was found. He planned to inspect Shele's apartment but encountered a problem. The door was sealed. Without hesitation, he obtained a court order to access the site and, accompanied by New York police officers, he arrived at the scene. He attempted to unlock the door with a key provided in advance, but the stubborn lock resisted for some time. After a few moments, Rod Covlin emerged from his apartment at the end of the corridor. He claimed to have heard noise and came to check what was happening. Upon questioning by the police and the detective, Rod took the key and effortlessly opened the door. This raised some questions for the detective. Did Rod really just happen to hear sounds in the corridor, or was he intentionally monitoring the situation? Once inside the apartment, the detective focused intently on finding evidence to support his theory of murder. According to Shele's relatives, she was home on December 31st, but her phone was missing. The detective thoroughly searched all rooms, only finding the woman's phone charger while the phone itself was not located. The detective also faced the task of examining the bathroom, the site of Shele's demise. He paid special attention to the hinge that investigators believed she had torn off during a fall. The more he examined this item, the more he doubted that Shele could have torn off the metal detail, which was securely attached to the cabinet. It would have required immense strength, and even considering the woman's weight, there were significant doubts about such a possibility. After a long discussion with law enforcement, the detective tried to convince them that this was not an accident but a homicide. The investigators were not persuaded, citing a lack of evidence. As a result, a decision was made to perform an autopsy to determine the cause of death conclusively. The impending exhumation of Shele's body sparked serious contemplation and debate within her family. More than 2 weeks had passed since her burial, and it was a difficult decision for her loved ones to make. In the Jewish religion, such interventions are viewed very negatively, and religious leaders often oppose this practice. The family needed time to decide. Despite the prohibitions, they deemed it crucial to uncover the truth about their daughter's death and agreed to the exhumation. Not only by moral considerations, to carry out the exhumation, a special order from the prosecutor's office was required, which was not easy to obtain. Despite the family's consent, it took almost 3 months. After securing the necessary documents, the exhumation and autopsy were conducted. The results were startling. The examination revealed that Shele did not die from a fall but from asphyxiation due to violent strangulation, which had broken her neck bones. Consequently, the official version of her death changed. No longer could her passing be considered an accident, and it was officially recognized that the young woman had been murdered. The detectives' efforts and suspicions proved to be well-founded. The autopsy results of Shele's body played a pivotal role, prompting the New York Police Department to resume the investigation into her death immediately. Investigators began meticulously examining new details, including phone call records and bank statements, all information crucial in a murder investigation. Besides family members, everyone who had any interaction with Rod and Shele was questioned, including the nanny, housekeeper, and even the lawyer handling their divorce. The lawyer informed the police about the oddities he had observed in the couple's behavior. At the first divorce hearing in May 2009, Rod claimed he couldn't pay alimony due to unemployment. The judge jokingly suggested that Rod might have to give up his favorite games, which infuriated him in the courtroom, revealing his true nature to everyone. Rod didn't stop there. He sought revenge against Shele, accusing her of an indecent lifestyle, misusing funds, and even calling her employer with slanderous claims about drugs and violence towards their son. These false accusations caused significant trouble for Shele. An investigation initiated based on these claims found no evidence to support her husband's words. However, the most appalling aspect of this story was when Rod and Shele's son revealed how his father had coached him to say phrases aimed at discrediting his mother. Rod paid a heavy price for his vile actions. At a new divorce hearing on July 7, 2009, he was prohibited from being alone with his children, a measure that remained in effect even after Shele's death. Rod was not granted custody of his children, and a social worker handed them over to Rod's parents, inciting his rage. The police also interviewed a woman who had previously cared for Rod's children before being dismissed by him. She provided detectives with intriguing information. It turned out that on December 30, Shele underwent an expensive keratin hair treatment worth several $100s. Post-treatment recommendations included avoiding moisture and heat exposure for several days, thus prohibiting baths or showers. This raised a question. Why would Shele risk damaging her hair by disregarding these recommendations? Investigators speculated that Shele didn't take a bath on the day of her death. However, their conclusions weren't direct evidence, and it was insufficient to charge anyone with murder based on this alone. Detectives also reviewed the building's surveillance footage where the couple lived on the day of the murder. They noticed Rod's peculiar behavior at 4 a.m. He left his apartment dressed as if he was going outside and returned after some time. The night watchman at the building's entrance, who was interrogated, found Rod's early morning outing unusual, as he had never left so early before. The watchman remembered Rod asking if he needed anything, to which he replied negatively. However, Rod returned a few minutes later with chocolate bars, offering them to him. The investigators believed Rod's behavior was deliberate to create an alibi for himself. Rod now became the primary suspect, and the investigators' task was to prove his guilt by any means necessary. Their main question was what could have driven Rod to murder his wife. During the investigation, despite 2 divorce hearings, Shele and Rod were still officially married, meaning that without a will or divorce, the property would automatically go to Rod. It was a matter of over $5 million. Another crucial point was that on December 31, 2009, Shele had made an appointment with her lawyer to change her will, intending to exclude her husband. This undoubtedly was a blow to Rod and provided a motive for the crime. The money, $5 million, which Rod could lose, was undoubtedly such a motive, since he was already a suspect. All of Shele's assets were transferred to a secure account pending further evidence of his involvement in the crime. It was clear that if Rod had been monitoring his wife, he could have known about her meeting with the lawyer to remove him from the will. Investigators suspected that Rod had installed spyware to track his wife. Surveillance footage also showed Shele returning home at 8 p.m. the night before, talking on the phone, which was never found after the crime. Now they knew for sure the phone was in the apartment. They decided to conduct another search of the crime scene. Upon returning to the apartment, the investigators didn't have to look long. They couldn't believe their eyes when they saw Shele's mobile phone calmly lying on her bedside table, connected to the charger. Neither during the New York police's initial search nor during the private detective's examination had anyone noticed the device in this location. Furthermore, investigators had photographed the room during previous searches, and the phone wasn't on the bedside table in the photos. There was only one explanation. Rod had brought the mobile phone back into Shele's sealed apartment. Whether this act was a foolish mistake or a deliberate taunt of the investigation was anyone's guess. Rod was called in for questioning, but he had already hired Ed, a lawyer who advised him to remain silent. The investigators had to continue looking for new evidence of his involvement. After examining Rod's phone records, police found frequent calls to a number registered in Jacksonville, North Carolina. The number belonged to Deborah Holmes, a married woman with 3 children, who was 14 years older than Rod. They had met at a backgammon competition 5 months before Shele's murder and had a passionate affair. The investigators saw a chance to find a lead and decided to call the woman to ask her a few questions. To their surprise, Deborah responded that her lawyer had advised her not to speak to them. Confronted with another refusal, law enforcement officials decided to inquire about the name of the attorney. It turned out to be the same lawyer representing Rod Covlin. The police's last hope rested on finding compromising messages or electronic correspondence between Rod and Deborah. They hoped to discover these on Shele's recently found phone. Unfortunately, all messages had been professionally deleted, and even expert programmers couldn't retrieve the data. Rod had meticulously planned everything, seemingly mocking the authorities. Days turned into months and years, and it became apparent that Rod Covlin was evading justice. Perhaps the crime he committed was perfect, but the rabbi's cleanup of the bathroom, erasing all traces of blood and other evidence, played a crucial role. This action destroyed all potential DNA fingerprints or fibers, complicating the investigation, which increasingly dragged on. Rod never admitted to his crime, and the lack of evidence prevented the case from going to trial. 5 years had passed since the investigation into Shele's demise began, yet no arrests had been made. After years of fruitless searches for clues and evidence of Rod Covlin's involvement in his wife's demise, the suspect's mistress suddenly came forward. Following her phone call, the police invited her to the station. Deborah Holmes, the mistress, immediately came in. It turned out that she and Rod had broken up a few months earlier, prompting her to contact the police. What she shared with the investigators over the next 3 days shocked them. Deborah had much to reveal. She told them about Rod's plans concerning custody of his children. Since Rod was still a suspect in his wife's demise and had no custody rights over the children, he couldn't access his deceased wife's money. Rod was prepared to do anything to seize Shele's millions and had hatched a vile plan. Covlin planned to convince his 15-year-old daughter to fake an assault, later accusing his father, Rod's dad, of the crime. This would land the grandfather in jail, losing custody rights over the grandchildren. Rod hoped his daughter would agree to his plan in exchange for money. Meanwhile, the criminal had been regularly withdrawing money from the only account he had access to, the one where Shele had deposited funds for their children's education. Rod's parents noticed he was squandering the savings, which should have been for his daughter and son's future. They were very unhappy with his lack of interest in his children's lives, leading to a dispute. Rod was so angry with his parents that he seriously contemplated ending their lives. In 2012, Rod Covlin confided his plan to Deborah. He intended to have his daughter put rat poison in her grandparents' tea. Since the girl was a minor, Rod calculated she would spend much less time in prison than he would. Deborah persuaded her lover to abandon this evil intent. Following this, Rod conceived several other ideas. At one point, he contemplated burning down his parents' house, jamming the doors to trap them inside. He also considered arranging a sham marriage for his daughter to a Mexican man, after which she would have to relinquish part of her inheritance to her father. Listening to Deborah's testimony, the police couldn't believe the reality of such details. All this time, she had been gathering evidence, amassing a trove of data on hard drives. Realizing she was dealing with a psychopath, she cautiously waited for Rod to lose interest in her before handing these valuable insights over to the investigators. The recordings contained hundreds, perhaps thousands, of Rod's conversations with various people. Now, the law enforcement officers had to meticulously listen to these gigabytes of data in search of convincing evidence. Deborah's contribution to this complex investigation was significant. As investigators began analyzing the recordings, they discovered something astonishing. In a conversation with a backgammon acquaintance, Rod inadvertently mentioned having keys to Shele's apartment and the ability to enter it at any time. These hard drives became a real treasure for the police. Extracting hundreds of materials related to the case, investigators found that Rod was plotting against his own daughter, planning to pin the responsibility for the mother's demise on her. In an email address that the father used to forge an email, it was claimed that the daughter admitted to lying and that her mother didn't just fall. According to the fabricated story, They had an argument in the evening, and in anger, she pushed her mother in the bathroom. Thanks to all the information gathered, the police finally had compelling evidence to charge Rod Covlin with the demise of his wife. On November 1, 2015, Rod Covlin was arrested. Shele's family awaited the trial of the daughter's perpetrator, but victory was not assured. The charges were circumstantial, and a skilled lawyer could instill doubt in the jurors' minds. Detectives continued their investigation, gathering new data and meticulously verifying all evidence. Soon, irrefutable proof emerged from an unexpected source. While in prison, Rod Covlin revealed details of his wife's demise to a fellow inmate. He described his act in detail, even mimicking the gesture he used to strangle her. The police requested surveillance footage and found it perfectly matched the autopsy results. This was direct evidence of Rod's guilt, almost amounting to a confession. The trial lasted 7 long weeks. During this time, the jury heard all the heinous plans Covlin intended to execute, including taking his wife's life, targeting his parents, and framing his own children. The jury was appalled by his cold-blooded and deceitful nature. It took them 2 days to reach a final verdict. In March 2019, the court found Rod Covlin guilty of the demise of Shele, his wife, and the mother of his children. Despite the lack of direct evidence, he was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole only after 25 years. Shele Covlin was a successful and determined woman who sought simple family happiness. However, a ruthless, deadly man crossed her path, destroying not only her life but also those of her children and loved ones. This tragic story found justice thanks to the determination of Shele's family, friends and the investigators at the NYPD. In this case, the criminal was punished for his horrific action not only in achieving justice for Shele but also in preventing possible future crimes. Rod Covlin will never again harm his family or the citizens of New York. Thanks for watching. Subscribe to the channel, and don't forget to click the bell not to miss new stories from around the world.